You're a quantum form that has found a way to live. That's what you are.
We sat down with Bill Mensch, the engineer of the 6502, the computer chip that first powered Super Mario, revolutionized computing in the 80s, and that is still being used today, not only in toys, but even in satellites and pacemakers.
What they succeeded in doing that nobody before had done was to make a CPU high performance while simple. So Bill was the originator of this mindset that today is basically everywhere. It's what rules the world.
In this video, Bill Mensch presents his latest work to us, and it's not a computer chip, but a theory about intelligence.
Intelligence started the whole thing. It didn't start with a big bang. And if you say, I want to start with a big bang, then you say, what happened before the big bang?
Bill comes from computer science, computer engineering. He is not contaminated by philosophy of mind, so he brings a fresh, uncontaminated perspective.
So the first law of the theory states that intelligence wants to know itself through an infinite continuum and collection of phenomena, including you and me.
Everything, including microprocessors, are ultimately this expression of an underlying, pre-existing, fundamental felt intelligence.
Intelligence embedded itself. Think of a cocoon. It just wrapped itself around the matter that it wanted to become.
Welcome to the Essentia Foundation's YouTube channel, and we hope you enjoy Bill Mensch's presentation of his theory of embedded intelligence. And if you like our content, may I please ask you to like and subscribe, as that really helps to grow our channel. Okay, gentlemen, we are live recording. Welcome, Bill Mensch. Welcome, Bernardo Kastrup. I'm very happy to sit down with both of you and to just give a small intro to our audience. I think about a year ago, Bernardo came to me and said, there is this great guy who was a founding father in the field of computing, the engineer of the Motorola 6800, who now has a theory of consciousness, which is very close to my own ideas, and it's close also to the ideas of an author for the Essentia Foundation, Federico Faggin, also inventor of the microprocessor, also having these ideas about consciousness that are very much, going away a bit from the more classical view in the field of computation that consciousness somehow might arise out of the process of computation, whereas you and Federico, and of course Bernardo, people know you for that, have the view that consciousness is much more fundamental. And I think very nice, I can give an introduction to Bill, but Bernardo, you build computers yourself. We can see in the background here actually the machinery which you used to do so as a hobby. And now we have Bill Mensch, and I think you are in a good position to properly introduce Bill and the contributions he has made to the field of computation, and now with this theory of consciousness. So Bernardo, if you can do that, please.
Well, it's no less than a big honor for me to be here with Bill. Bill is a grandee in computer science. He and somebody else whose name I even forgot. I remember Bill always were the co-developers of a microprocessor called the 6502. They first designed the 6501. They got into a little bit of trouble with Motorola, and then they designed the 6502, which was an extraordinarily successful CPU, or central processing unit, which had what they succeeded in doing that nobody before had done was to make a CPU high performance while simple. This was very hard to do with the mindset at the time, the mindset of mini computers, incredibly complex CPUs with enormous instruction sets, lots of internal registers. It's easy to do things if you allow yourself to do things in a complex way. What is difficult is to do things in a simple way. And Bill was the pioneer of that back in 1975, if I remember correctly. Bill, I was 1 year old. And that example of making fast CPUs that are in fact simpler, smaller, that's what eventually led to RISC in the early 80s, to ARM in the second half of the 80s, and to everything now. Everything now follows that philosophy. everything, every Apple CPU, every Qualcomm CPU, every Intel and AMD CPUs, they are not seen as risk, but internally they have a very risk simple pipeline structure. So Bill was the originator of this mindset that today is basically everywhere. It's what rules the world today. And in terms of philosophy, I think what makes Bill unique is that he was not contaminated like the rest of us were. Because you see, having awareness of the whole background of a certain discipline in a certain way is helpful, but in another big way is very unhelpful, because you start thinking along the established categories of that field, and that restricts your degrees of freedom in your thinking. You sort of unthinkingly start adapting to the categories and the styles of reasoning that are present in your field. And Bill comes from computer science, computer engineering. He is not contaminated by philosophy of mind. He's not contaminated by all those categories, all those concepts. And so he thought along a much bigger sort of thought space, so to say. So he brings a fresh, uncontaminated perspective, which I think is unique value. The price the rest of us have to pay for it is he uses words in ways that may not be consistent with the way words are, in a very retentive way used in philosophy of mind. So the listener or the watcher should be alert to this. Try to capture what Bill is trying to say, as opposed to getting stuck in the word definitions that you bring with you, because that may not be what Bill is trying to get across. So take a step back and listen to the man. That's my advice to the audience.
Bill, now we've talked enough, and it's time to give the floor to you.
Great. Well, I'm pleased to be here. Thank you, Bernardo, for your compliments, and you as well, Hans. I wanted to say that some of what Bernardo knows about or remembers about the beginnings of the microprocessor revolution, it turned out to be a little different than the industry generally knows. And Bernardo, there's a few details here that I think enhances the history of microprocessors. That's where I'm coming from. I'm coming from microprocessor as the core of embedding intelligence into things, like garage door openers, like these cell phones we have, like the PCs that I'm using right now to talk with you. It's like this is an example of our latest stuff with FPGAs. This is a system on a chip. This is my 16-bit, 816 based CPU right there. That's the 265. So in other words, I design microprocessor products. So we begin here. I'll start by just saying that, connecting back to what we were just talking about, this theory comes from the fact that I design microprocessing systems, microprocessors themselves, the interfaces to the real world. So for instance, the two chips that Apple used, Wozniak used, was the 6502 plus the 6521 chip, which is a PIA, peripheral interface adapter. I designed that at Motorola and then redesigned it at MOS Technology and then redesigned it again in CMOS. So I've designed it a few different times. So in other words, it's really evolved from where I was. So now I'm going to go back to the idea that this theory of embedded intelligence comes from the idea of embedding intelligence into things. And then I have my own intelligence. Each of you, Bernardo, you have a great intelligence. Hans, you do as well. But you created it. So now let me begin. I have a cautionary tale to start with. Caution, much like studying consciousness, contemplating, studying, and applying the theory of embedded intelligence will change your life. This theory is a revolution in all areas of contemplation, all sciences, and all practical applications of the theory. The reason why I'm saying it will change your life is because the theory causes one to reconsider one's beliefs and what one knows about oneself and one's worldview. It's going to change everything about it if you choose to follow the ideas. Now, revolutions. There was a postdoc, I think, at MIT, and his project was to figure out how do we get these revolutions? What's the common denominator of a revolution? So in that book, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, Thomas Kuhn, which is famous about this topic actually, on page 96, he writes, almost always the men and women achieve these fundamental inventions of a new paradigm have been either very young or very new to the field. These paradigms, they change. That's what I am. I'm new to this whole field of consciousness, which is a field that I'm claiming is going down the wrong rabbit hole. It should be going down that rabbit hole of intelligence, just that simple word. It's what you have. Everything I'm saying you should find inside of you. You don't have to look anywhere else other than inside of you. So the model of intelligence. The outside circle is if you can expand that in infinite in all directions, that would be the universe and where the universe is in our worldview. So in other words, intelligence started the whole thing. It didn't start with a big bang. And if you say, I want to start with a big bang, then you say, what happened before the big bang? What caused the big bang? But all of these theories that people have come up with, the quantum mechanics and all of those other things, consciousness, the hard problem really isn't that hard. I'll talk about that later. But the thing is if you know factually that you created you, then what I'm saying is your core intelligence came from that infinite source. It's just everyone and everything has been created because intelligence decided it wanted to become you. And that became you as soon as it made that decision. Now you took over. Now you're the one that's in charge of it. You gathered up a cell from your mother, a cell from your father, and then you built the rest of you. And Mike Levin has a lot to say about that. So what I'm saying is that the space-time is the real world. That's what you observe, what we're observing. You cannot observe intelligence directly. It's just like some of the philosophies about consciousness, and we'll talk about that later. But what I'm getting at here is there's an exchange between the space-time and intelligence. So that circle there with the space-time would be the dark blue. And then we, as humans, figured out how to understand our world, and then we created embedded intelligence technology. That's where the microprocessor comes in. And we wanted to embed this in everything. The more things we embed it in, the better we can live, the better we can understand our world. So that's how that works. So I claim that nature's free intelligence, which is not embedded. Once it's embedded, then it's embedded. When it goes back, when the living thing dies, or when you explode like a nuclear bomb, then the intelligence of that quantum stuff that's inside of the atomic structure is free, and it becomes free intelligence again. So the next slide, consciousness, which is a big topic. And Bernardo, I don't know if you've ever been to one of the Science of Consciousness conference in Tucson, Arizona, but I presented this basic same thing. It's online, but with previous slides in 2022. That's when I met Stuart Hameroff and David Chalmers and all of the deep thinkers about consciousness. That's when I met them. That's actually right before that is when I ended up meeting Dante Loretta and some of these other people that attend that conference. So this was all new to me 3 years ago. This was not a topic. This was a topic that actually I came up with but I didn't know it was connected to the consciousness world. So it was kind of a surprise when I was asked, what's the difference between consciousness and embedded intelligence? My simple answer that day was, oh, I didn't think that was going to be a question we were going to handle today, but let me think. Okay, in order for something to be conscious, it has to have an embedded intelligence. Its intelligence is what's applied to the consciousness structure of what that means. So now let's go back to this slide. So embedded intelligence technology, that's what EIT stands for, can sense, process, communicate, and actuate. Those four characteristics, those four functions is what everything has to do. And when you think of consciousness, your own, the question is it self-conscious? It has to be self-conscious. So therefore, think about yourself. Are you self-conscious? Well, my hand, my head. Yes, I am conscious of this is me. Okay, so that's sensing, processing, communicating, actuating. So SPCA could be considered objective consciousness. Most philosophical use of the word consciousness is considered subjective consciousness. It's your whole life is part of what you might think of as your consciousness. So your consciousness is uniquely yours. It's one of a kind. Hans, your consciousness is one of a kind. It's how you got to this Zoom call. How you got to now is your consciousness, which is why it's the hard problem. But if you think that you built this from that first, when you collected those two cells from your mother and your father, it's not hard at all. Another way of looking at it is there's a book called We Are Electric by Sally Adey. And I'm saying, think about it. We are intelligence. We started with intelligence. We used intelligence to create ourselves, and we retain that connectivity to the infinite source of intelligence. That's how this works. So now, EIT's SPCA augments human SPCA possibilities, producing augmented objective consciousness. That's what we do with our cell phones. It has cell phones and the technology that we've created, that we've embedded intelligence into for their sensing, processing, communicating abilities is meant to augment, because we can create far more senses. Like this, right now I'm running on Wi-Fi here. So it can sense Wi-Fi and process that, and we can talk today. So it's augment. Everything we do with microprocessors is meant to augment our objective consciousness. Humans have designed autonomous machines with ability to SPCA for autonomous machine objective consciousness. What does that mean? Think of the automobiles. Look at the automobiles. Look at all this wonderful technology we're using, even the Neuralink, which is another interesting thing we'll talk about later. Next slide. Okay, so the theory. A theoretical law is a law that analyzes and connects empirical studies to define or advance a theoretical position. Empirical studies. Think of yourself. That's your experience of yourself. You don't have to go anywhere else other than yourself. You're a quantum form that has found a way to live. That's what you are. And that quantum form became atomic structures. And then you use those abiotic materials to create your cells. And then you found a way to create all of you so we could have this conversation. So the first law of the theory states that intelligence wants to know itself through an infinite continuum and collection of phenomena, including you and me. Second law of the theory states that the intelligence is gained. This is where sorry about that. Is gained through embedded experiences and is not lost through a destruction experience, becoming free once again, changing to and from free and embedded states. So in other words, how do you think we evolved as a species? We had to do this. It wasn't any mystery. It was the fact that we had that exchange, which was in that diagram that I first showed you. That's called evolution. So the third law of the theory states that intelligence increases the number of use cases and complexities with time. We have about 8 billion people. I have no idea how many mosquitoes. I don't know how many of these other things that we have that sometimes cause us problems because they inject some material into us that makes us itch or do some other things. But we live with a whole lot of life forms here and a whole lot of interesting shapes of things and other things. And I could go on and on there. Let's go to the next slide. So the intelligence, I define intelligence as nature's free and all embedded intelligence is characterized as the ability, as I mentioned before, to sense, process, communicate, and actuate based upon information gained from an understanding of itself and others for the benefit of many. Nature uses embedded intelligence to self-assemble all things, all phenomena observed. So now when you think of yourself and you think, why did you ever go to any school? Why did your parent, and if you have children, why did you want your children to learn anything? It's because you wanted them to evolve their intelligence. So now let's go to the next slide. Okay, applied intelligence. The infinite universe, I use IU there just because some people think there's multi-universes. I don't believe there are multi-universes. However, you can think that there would be. You can imagine there could be, but that's in your imagination. We'll talk about that later too. So the infinite universe began as an infinite free intelligence. Free means not embedded. Intelligence first created coherent quanta energy waveforms. So when you think about quantum mechanics, then where did the little waves come from? They just appeared? You could say, well, they just appeared. And I'm saying, no. With this theory, these waveforms were the first use of intelligence. And you go, well, how did it know how to do that? And I'm saying, think of it. We were all there. The other law is that intelligence is never lost. It's only gained. So that means that you were there at the beginning. That means the three of us were hanging out saying, this is totally static, and we're hanging out, and I look over at Bernardo. Are you bored yet? I mean, for an infinite amount of time, nothing's happened. So Bernardo, think about it. What can you do? Hans, what can you do? Oh, how about this? How about if we wiggle, the little wiggle? So my theory of all that is the little wiggle. The little wiggle is quantum. So now we go, hey, that worked. So now what are we going to do next? There's another slide I have that will tell you what we do next. Okay, so intelligence creates subatomic particles through the process called decoherence. Now we're in the quantum mechanics stuff. Entanglement can be thought of as intelligently connected quantum bits, qubits, with opposite spins or information bits, ones and zeros. So they're connected. If you want to go down that rabbit hole, they're connected through intelligence. It is now thought that the speed of intelligence is infinite. Oh, that's interesting. Does that mean that if we could, I'll address that in another slide later. All things in nature have used intelligence to create the observed phenomena through self-assembly. Atoms build atoms, you build you, I build me. Now that I could mean intelligence built me. Life begins and evolves anywhere conditions are available through the collective intelligence of abiotic matter. My friend Dante Loretta is the PI of OSIRIS-REx, got a sample from Bennu, brought it back. It was about this much from a sample, cost $1 billion and he came in under budget, he claims. But now they're studying the abiotic material because the asteroids are older than Earth. You want to know something older than dirt? Asteroids. Next slide. Okay, all biotic, this slide is, okay. Evolution. All biotic and biotic matter began from free intelligence. When matter is destroyed, the second law of theory states that all embedded intelligence becomes free intelligence once again. These cycles of free intelligence and embedded intelligence contribute to the evolution in nature. It is possible that embedded intelligence can contribute to free intelligence, as shown in the third slide, bidirectional arrows in the graphical model of intelligence. Human-made technology has evolved in a similar way. Just look around you. We didn't have these smartphones 30 years ago. We do now. That's because we collectively wanted to do that. We wanted to build it with our collective intelligence. Next slide. Okay. Intelligence evolution. Nature's intelligence evolution. I'm going back to a little bit of what I started back about quantum. So it first started, the use of intelligence started with quantum forms of things. Then we created, intelligence created atomic structures. Think of a proton. Think of a proton as saying, is this proton self-conscious? It collected enough quantum information, quantum particles, to become a proton. So if it wasn't self-conscious, it would keep growing until it became the size of a basketball, and that wouldn't work. So therefore, protons basically, Bernardo, you might know more about that. I think protons are all the same size. But then electrons came along, and you go, what happened between the electron and the proton? I call it they fell in love. Love, all forms of love, are the energy of attraction. So that first electron found a proton, fell in love, and that's how we have the most popular atomic structure in the universe. That's what they say. The astronomers and others say that one proton and one electron is the most popular atomic structure. Well, you can imagine maybe it's easier to build just one proton and one electron, fall in love, and then two of these pairs fell in love with oxygen. And then we have water. And then you go, oh, well, that's how this whole thing built up. And so what's interesting, of all the possibilities, there's only apparently about 92 stable atomic structures, and they're in the element table. But if you think about it, why aren't there millions of atomic structures? Why only 92? I don't know, but somebody might know. But the atomic structures know because they stopped building them. I don't know why. Okay, that's just another philosophical good question. Okay, so then the collective mineral evolution. Next, you wanted to create minerals. Now, at the Gem and Mineral Museum in Tucson, where they have one of the largest mineral exchanges in the world in February, I think, each year. Anyhow, in there, they talk about the evolution of minerals. And I'm thinking, what's going on there? I don't know. Next, you have molecules. And this is what Dante's looking for. All of the abiotic molecules that's needed to produce a life form. But we know that we have a lot of water on planet Earth, and that lot of water gives the mobility of these molecular systems. And so then we can start building cells. So the embedded intelligence of a cell has to be there And one of the things that Stuart Hameroff in consciousness, and Stuart Hameroff is the anesthesiologist, so he's not really figuring out consciousness. He's trying to figure out, as an anesthesiologist and a professor of that, how you can shut down what you call the consciousness. How can you shut down sensing, processing, communicating, and actuating so the surgeon can go in and start making slices, and you're not coming back with a fist and stop doing that to me. You just calmly, unsensitively let him do his work beneficially. So then, after the cellular cells arise, figured out how to build a cell, then the whole living system comes from that same type of intelligence. It's intelligence to build you. Next slide. So this is the collective intelligence evolution. This is important because we started with myths because we didn't know what was going on. And I take you down the whole evolution of our collective intelligence. Myth making is still a very important thing about the way we behave with one another. It's called religion. Okay, moving on. Just looking at the math associated with a human and the number of neurons we have and the connectivity. That's amazing. That's amazing. If you aren't amazed by those numbers, then all of those neurons work in parallel. That's the massive parallel computing capability that the hard problem isn't really hard when you think of it along these lines, because we are intelligence. And when you know that, you know that. So I got this human-bounded infinite intelligence from Andrew Maynard, who is a professor at ASU on the College of Global Futures, and his professorship is in with the future of innovation in society. He gave me that infinite intelligence thing. Actually, he was talking about bounded infinities, and then I said, can you think of a human as a bounded infinity? So with this think human quantum, these are, if you right click on those things, you can go to where that link is. Then look at the number of cells we have in an average body. It's amazing how many of these cells. The link there with Michael Levin's link right there is absolutely amazing. He has another one that's 56 minutes I just watched yesterday. Amazing what he's doing, and he uses the word intelligence. He likes the word intelligence. He and I exchanged, we did an email, a recorded email with Mike. And so Mike and I are more or less on the same path, but he's doing it in a totally different way. So you know that these processors started with 8-bit processors for embedded. Now we have NVIDIA CPUs that have a massive parallel processing system and the ability to go through a lot of information in a short amount of time. And that's what we're calling now AI. Artificial intelligence is another term that we can talk about, but I don't like the use of the term. It seems like it's a confusion. It's like bringing mythology into something that should be scientific. Okay, so now what I'm saying in that slide is EIT is the key to understanding yourself and the universe. Then I have these things called machine intelligence. You know that machine intelligence, we found a way to build more complex machines. All of the chips that we design today are designed by machines. When I stopped designing in about the middle 90s, early 90s, it's because the machine now can do it. You don't need a human other than to push buttons. The machines are doing all of our chips designs now. It's because when I was designing, we were designing in tens of thousands of transistors. The 6502 was about 3,500 transistors. But when I stopped designing, it was a 265. It was a single chip with an 816 on it. That one has about, I think, 60,000 transistors. But now there's 60 billion transistors. I mean, we're talking a lot. So that's the evolution of the machines. So next I wanted to say personal cosmology or philosophy of cosmology, and this idea that the desiderata was a small statement by a guy I forget his name right now. But that's an interesting statement. And if you read that, and you'll see that this statement I pulled out of there, you are a child of the universe, no less than the trees and the star. This guy knew what I'm talking about at his own level. So now, imagination. Imagination is the ability to form mental images of things and events that are not present to the senses. That's what you do. Bernardo, you have a rich imagination. And the people you hang out with, like Hans and others that I've watched you talk, you guys have a rich imagination. Roger Penrose, imagining a black hole. Dude, have you ever been in a black hole? No. That means you have to imagine the black hole. Now, if you take pictures of it or look at it through a telescope or whatever you're going to use, whatever tool you're using, you're not in it. You're not experiencing it directly. You're observing it and then you're imagining what could be going on there. Learning from nature. So what I did to create this is I learned from nature that says, wait a minute, I'm part of nature. A lot of people want to separate us from nature. I'm an animal. I just know how to use a computer, or I knew how to, somehow I figured out how to design a microprocessor. And then I built, by the way, with my own hands, and I have it in my museum, the first board or the first system that tested the first 2.5 years of all 6502s from MOS Technology. It's in my museum. But that means that I had to build a system to be able to test it so that when we sold it, we knew it worked. And all of the chips that I designed were tested on that one tester. It was replaced by $1 million tester. So that idea of learning from nature, now, can we learn from our own technology? Can we learn about nature from our own technology? That's what Geoffrey Hinton did at the University of Toronto on an Apple II. He did a small digital neural network and going, oh, we feed forward, we get input into the system, and then we compare it to what so we back propagate what we did. And then we're training our neural networks. That's what we do in our own minds. We say, oh, that's a bad guy. He's got a gun. I need to figure out what I'm going to do next. So in other words, that's what we did when we didn't know what was going on out there, except after a few saber-toothed tigers ate a few of us, somebody says, that's a bad dude. You don't want to be around him. And that's how we learned how to build the neural networks. That's where NVIDIA came from. So this is the information that's in these slides. You can go through yourself, read it yourself, and then you're going to use your embedded intelligence to browse the internet, find the information you want to find. You know, the NVIDIA is the new form of, what do they call those? It was what we used in school to get the answer quick. It was called Cliff Notes. They were Cliff Notes. So that's what you do now. You use AI to be your new form of Cliff Notes on anything. So reverse biometrics is saying, we know how this embedded intelligence works. So does that help us understand how nature works? And that's what this is about. This is about saying, wait a second, if you use a smartphone and they're getting more sophisticated and you start getting quantum, or you're getting the neural network stuff into the phones, that's helping you with the information you have in the phone. This thing has 0.5 terabyte, but I know Apple's got terabyte versions of this. And you go, that's more memory than the entire universe, entire planet had when I started designing these chips. Okay, so then I use augmented human intelligence and autonomous machines and how they connect together. And then the last slide is what I call the discussion topics about some things you'll have fun with your friends there, Bernardo. You'll have fun with. So can we know what the speed of entanglement is? Oh my gosh, let's talk about that. How about the speed? Can we measure entanglement? Can we do that? Oh, we need some more equipment. Could the speed of intelligence be infinite? Could nature's life on Earth intercept and decode and understands the intelligent communication from distant star systems, distant galaxies. I mean, come on, let's use our philosophical approach to asking these kind of questions and trying to find the answers through our imagination. But then we can start building tools. The intelligence model suggests that only nature can communicate with infinite intelligence of the infinite universe. Could embedded intelligent technology intercept, decode, and understand communications from a distant star? That means that we can learn from them, maybe, but at the same time, what are we going to do? We can't physically go there. So then what are we going to do? And so that's where you could say, some people think that maybe I came from a distant star, but I didn't. I was here the whole time. And did I communicate with a distant star? I don't think so. I think it was just simple math, simple chemistry, simple physics, and someone decided they wanted to put a bunch of transistors together to do something. The funnest thing is to build a processor that can process other information that you get from other transistors called memory systems. Okay, there we have it.
Thank you so much, Bill, for this presentation. It's really great and beautiful that, as Bernardo started out already, you came to this in a very creative, intuitive way, and there's a lot of richness here. I think, Bernardo, nice to share that. Of course, the field of consciousness studies and those conferences, I think you quit going to a lot of them. And it's talk about qualia, phenomenal consciousness, the redness of red, and sometimes becoming a bit boring, this in-talk, this parroting, so to speak, of that consciousness community. And I see myself as an sort of an outsider, an observer to it all. And to me, it's all very fascinating. But I really enjoy such creative outside view to this field. And Bernardo, my first question to you, reflecting on this presentation given by Bill, how does this enrich your own ideas? Because I think there's a lot of similarity. And where does it inform and enrich your own ideas, what you just heard Bill saying, presenting to us?
Can we stop sharing so I can see you guys better? Otherwise, Okay, now I can see you guys better. Bill is a heritage of humanity. He is a treasure. And what he has managed to do is becoming exquisitely rare, which is to approach something fresh. Because with the world of social media and instant communication, everybody's now contaminated. And nobody is giving a fresh look to a field. It has become nearly impossible. And Bill succeeded in doing exactly that. How does it enrich my perspectives? As you mentioned, it dovetails very well with my own thinking, which reassures me because I didn't have a fresh perspective into this. Bill calls me a large language model. Because a lot of what I say is sort of
you are
it's
a
derivative.
large language model.
It's derivative, so that somebody with the intelligence of Bill Mensch was in a position to look at it anew, fresh, and sort of validate some of what I've been thinking. It's enormously reassuring. More specifically, in terms of enrichment, you probably noticed that for Bill, not only are we expressions of the otherwise free intelligence as it sort of enters space-time and provides a sort of an organizing principle to matter, and we are the result of that. But not only us, everything, including microprocessors, are ultimately this expression of an underlying pre-existing fundamental felt intelligence. And that gives a different quality to things than my own analytic idealism, because I make this pretty hard, sharp distinction between living beings and objects. Bill's perspective softens that. And the wonderful thing about it is that I listen to it. I listen to what he's saying. if he would be speaking the language of analytic philosophy and its categories and terms, I probably would dismiss it. But he is speaking out of a felt understanding that is very authentic. It's not secondhand. It's not third hand. It's part of his experience. And I find that fascinating, and it helps me sort of reconcile my intellectual position with the way I feel about things like computers and microprocessors. I see a sort of luminosity in them that my own theory would say, well, it's not even an object. But Bill's perspective softens me in that sense and gives me more openness to the significance of inanimate nature.
Beautiful. Thanks, Bernardo. I'm just sharing. Can both of you see this? I'm sharing for the audience again a sort of a core slide in your presentation. Nice for Bernardo to also see again, because I think in reading your work, Bernardo, we can see pictures like this as well, but then we wouldn't see the word intelligence, but we see mind at large and we see consciousness. So I think nice to reflect on for our audience to do bring some sort of analytic view on it. The word central in your thinking, Bill, of course, intelligence, how it's free, it becomes embedded, and then we have technology, and how that relates to a core process, what you call sensing, processing, communicating, and actuating, right? That's your definition of intelligence. So it's sensing, processing, communicating, and actuating. And then we have a free intelligence, and then nature embedded intelligence and embedded intelligence technology. Bernardo, if you bring your... please.
That was his definition of embedded intelligence.
Oh, check. Yeah, you're already now in analytic mode. Please go on. Because how do you sort of translate these words, or you think they don't need translation when Bill talks about intelligence? I mean, you would say consciousness or mind at large, right? So please reflect on that.
If I understand him correctly, what he means by objective intelligence is intelligence that is out there in the world at large, not only within the personal self. It's an all-encompassing intelligence that goes beyond us. And in that sense, it's objective because it is not in our subjectivity. He is not saying by the word objective intelligence, he's not claiming that it's purely abstract. That's not what he's saying. He's saying it's out there, it's all-encompassing, it doesn't depend on us to exist. And on the part where he says that the products of intelligence can never be lost, which I agree with. And by the way, it's part of analytic idealism as well. The idea is that even if a particular expression of the otherwise free intelligence that is the starting point of it all, even before the Big Bang, even if a particular expression of intelligence is no longer there, like a person dies or a computer is broken, it doesn't mean that the fruits of the interactions of that embedded intelligence with its surroundings, those fruits are not lost. They just become free again. So death in that sense is a sort of harvesting of the products of the interaction of an embedded form of intelligence with the rest of the world. It's not a loss. It's the freeing of it. That resonates a lot with analytic idealism when I talk about death being the end of the dissociation, and therefore the contents of the dissociation become cognitively available to nature at large, as opposed to being restricted in the boundaries of a particular living being. So these are the things to keep in mind, how he uses the words and what he means. I think most people would just understand it. They don't need my observations, but people with an analytic philosophy background may need clarification.
I must say, indeed, I'm now showing the slide, Bill, of your axiom, so to speak, of the theory. When you say intelligence wants to know itself, I think intuitively a lot of people will agree here. We have Federico Faggin basically saying the same, right? Bernardo in his one wants to know itself, he says. And then Bernardo has just reflected on that second law of intelligence and becoming embedded. I am just fascinated by you said, like the three of us hang out there and we suddenly wanted to know ourselves. So you have this idea of us, of you, that we are already in that free state somehow, and then through that process we become embedded. I'm just super curious on your thoughts of how. So yeah, let me just say it like this: does the one or the free state needs to become embedded to know itself? Is that sort of the why embeddedness has to, it has to become embedded, right? Is that it?
Yeah. And in fact, what was interesting is the first time that what would you call it? Ted Humphrey, the philosopher, right? Philosophy professor that I just talked about. Well, I'm in Costa Rica visiting him, my wife and I visiting him in Costa Rica, in San Jose, I think. Anyhow, I'm pretty sure that's anyhow. So he asked me, so where where are you coming from? And what do you think the benefit is here for anybody on this idea? And I go, and so I already told you guys about this. And but Ted says, then he says, so we had a couple of glasses of wine, and then he asked me these questions, and then I'm going to answer it so the next day we can talk about some more, right? And so I went to use my computer, and at black screen, it died. I'm in Costa Rica, and I don't have my computer. And so I wrote up his questions. I found a piece of paper and pencil, and I wrote up his questions. And he goes in the next morning. I said, here are the answers to your question. He goes, wow, it's been a long time since I've ever seen anybody write in cursive in answering my questions. They're usually digital, right? And so then what was his next question? He goes, wait a second, Bill. If there's embedded intelligence, then what did the embedding? That's a good question. I said, intelligence embedded itself. Think of a cocoon. It just wrapped itself around the matter that it wanted to become. And he goes, oh, he was expecting, because he taught history, philosophy, and religion. I think he thought I was going to go to, there's this character out there that we all know about. His name's God, or her name's God. And God does the embedding. And I'm going, no, no. Look at yourself. Who learned about these topics? And why would you even bother wanting to talk to me about it? Don't you have already the answers? I mean, really, you don't need my answers. You can find them yourself. And so you're doing that to you. I'm doing this to me. And we're sharing this collectively. Who knows? Maybe you benefit from what I have to say. Maybe you don't. But that's your choice.
And Bill, yeah, sorry, Bernardo, yeah, and just go ahead. I just want to sort of fit this in as well. What fascinates me, if we would look at it, it does fascinate me, intelligence versus what in the field is called phenomenal consciousness, how those two relate. Because in Bill's, how I listen to you, Bill, you seem to say that it is presupposed intelligence is needed to have phenomenal consciousness. But Bernardo, that's just my sort of remark. But please respond to what Bill is saying, if you can fit this in.
Yeah, I'll start with your remark. I think what Bill is saying is that phenomenal consciousness is fundamentally not stupid. Even in its original state, it is not stupid. There is some cognitive power that is inherent to it. It's not just the potentiality for experiences. There is a degree of cognition that is fundamentally embedded there, and it can enrich itself through embedding. That's the evolution, the entire story of evolution that Bill told us, from single elementary particles to the hydrogen atom to molecules, minerals, living beings, and the cosmos as a whole. So the cognition can be enriched, but the starting state's not stupid. I think that's what he's saying. So one way to and that's what I wanted to say even before you ask the question, but it dovetails well. Again, I'm speaking to the handicaps like me that come from the tradition of analytic philosophy and fully contaminated. Another way to try to make sense of what Bill is saying is that his free intelligence is the fundamental organizing principle in nature. It shapes nature. So And that's why he alluded to AI being a misnomer, artificial intelligence, because it's not artificial. It's something that has been shaped by a pre-existing intelligence, which is now manifesting itself in embedded form. So the intelligence is not artificial. It's the natural starting point of the thing. It becomes embodied because it's an organizing principle that embodies itself in material structures. And that embodiment, you can say it's artificial if the organizing principle has channeled itself through us as engineers that build that stuff. But the original intelligence is never artificial. It's the starting point of the whole thing. It is the ontological primitive. It's the bottom line of the chain of reduction. So it's never artificial.
Interesting. And this is also where you say that in Bill's thinking, that hard distinction you often make, or hard, but I mean the distinction between living systems and abiotic intelligence, or so to speak, it's more in your line of thinking. You have a stricter boundary there, and for Bill, that doesn't seem to go up, right?
I think Bill is well aligned with Michael Levin in this respect.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, totally.
And then
And
because
we've only talked a couple of times. We've
Yeah.
exchanged a couple of emails, but he was already there. One of his emails is like 2 sentences, like the future is intelligence or something like that.
yeah,
So he's
yeah.
using the
Michael is
word.
amazing.
Although there is this difference, it's not an irreconcilable difference, because I accept that even if an object is not a dissociative process in the mind of nature like you and I are, it too is organized. Its shape is given by a fundamental organizing principle in nature, the archetypes of the mind of nature in my terminology. So it's not irreconcilable, but yes, there is a difference in nuance there about,
Yeah, exactly. I see that it's just a nuance. It's something I find interesting, which I just thought about. I just spoke to John Vervaeke, and he's a cognitive scientist. So he's all about cognition, right? When I spoke to him, I was talking to him about physics and quantum, and he said, "Quit talking. I'm not interested in your physics theory of consciousness. I want to hear your theory on cognition." And thinking about what you say, Bill, when you say sensing, processing, communicating, and actuating, so it starts with sensing. And sensing has to do with cognition, right? Because when you sense, right,
Well, the cognition comes after, doesn't the cognition comes after the sense?
well, the question is, I have how how to select even that. That's what Vervaeke calls, help me out here, Bernardo, but I'm just thinking out loud here, what Vervaeke would call relevance realization, the fact that in a certain circumstance you somehow just know what to focus on, when a computer would just be sort of would be blown away by the entropy of all the states coming in, how to mirror all of that, and somehow we are able to sort of make that process of sensing already is an intelligent act, right? So that's what I'm thinking about.
Yeah, I think Bill thinks of cognition in terms of cognition as we experience it.
Yeah.
So we need to have sensory data in order to cognize the world.
Yeah.
Vervaeke uses the word cognition in terms of a fundamental movement of intelligence.
Exactly.
And so in the way Vervaeke uses the word, cognition is applicable to free intelligence. So in that sense, I think.
Yeah. But it's so, and so that sensing, if we would go back to the free intelligence, Bill, so it then senses, it wants to know itself. I'm just super curious what you're sort of, because you dismiss sort of the Big Bang, right? That's just a story,
Big
right?
Bang. If you say Big Bang, you got to say which one.
Yeah.
That's what you got to say, which one. I mean, we're talking about, and this is where this background radiation and all these fun things to talk about, where they came from, because now we're going to support that. And then it's expanding. The universe is expanding. Well, it's already infinite. So the only thing that's expanding is what we're observing. And when we got the Webb telescope, we found it's 4 times bigger in all directions. And you go, well, it just grew because we built a tool. That's crazy. And so then you go, well, can we ever see the other edge of the universe? I don't know. I don't think so. But hey, why don't we try? I mean, We got some money, we got some engineers, we got some scientists. Let's keep going bigger. Go big or go home.
Yeah, I think, Bill, in Vervaeke's terminology, for instance, you alluded to what might have been the motivation for the Big Bang or for the embedding. You alluded to, the free intelligence getting bored and therefore
Yeah.
started exciting itself and embedding itself. In Vervaeke's terminology, that um, that boredom, that felt boredom that led to an action, that's already cognition.
Yeah.
You see what
Yeah.
I mean? It's
Exactly.
not cognition in the sense of cognizing the world through the senses, which a prerequisite for that is the senses. But you could have a form of endogenous cognition in the sense of the primary movements of the intelligence, even before it embedded itself. So that's the sense, I think, in which Vervaeke speaks of it.
Yeah, and I think if you look at it had to be static. It had to start static, nothing changing. And that's just intelligence hanging out. That's what I was giving you the model. Think about it, Hans. Think about
Mm.
it, Bernardo. We're hanging out and everything's static. And you go, dude, we've been hanging out like this for an infinite number of years or infinite number of whatever you want to call it. And then you go, let's change something because change is something we want to do. So then how can we become this conversation? So that
Yeah,
was
yeah.
an evolution. That's a lot of steps over. And if you look at 15 billion years, just as a round number, that we think the universe is 15, the observable part of the universe is 15 billion years old. And our solar system, our star and our planetary system, right, is only 4.5. That means that this thing was going on for 9 or 10 billion years before our sun shows up. You dude, that's a lot of cycles of stars burning out and then dust coming and all the cycles. And so we're actually at least 15 billion years old.
And Bill, when I'm super curious. You made in my opinion, more a quantitative difference between nature's embedded intelligence being us, and then the technology we embed with intelligence, the chips you've built, because you shared just the sheer amazing numbers of neurons and synapses in our brain and that level of connectivity, and we're far away when you compare that to computing. But it seems as if in your theory it's more or less a quantitative difference, and then that in the future when we would reach sort of systems that have that level of connectivity, they could sort of be the same embedded intelligence as we are. Is that correct, or do you see a qualitative difference between that?
Okay, I haven't that graphic, this graphic is something that says nature found ways of building tools, which I haven't thought through. I haven't done the deep thinking on what the topic I think you're alluding to. In other words, can we build something as complex as ourselves? That's really what's behind some of the discussions about the man-machine interface. It's part of the Neuralink. I was going to say something about Neuralink. It's the part of the Neuralink is can we get enough neurons connected to a machine to make a difference? And I'm saying the reason why you want a machine to help you with body functions that stop working, well, Mike Levin is coming from a different place. He's saying we can create living things to help us with our own bodies so that we don't age. And then you go, yeah, but am I going to have enough money to live for the next 1,000 years? And then you go, well, there's other sociology things that we have to deal with if we live for 1,000 years or 200 years. I mean, the Medicare will run out if you're in the United States or whatever. And so there's other interesting questions that come up. But what I'm getting at is try designing something with 20 billion cells that have 7,000 connections. Try building that. I'm saying Okay, so we got transistors, so we hook up the transistors. Yeah, but inside of those, how do we get the quantum functions? Because what Stuart Hameroff is working on, or thinking that, along with Roger Penrose, is microtubules. So he's trying to figure out how we get information stored in these. And as we age, the microtubules break up. So we can't store our quantum information, or our ions that we store in our microtubules. That's an analog function. I studied analog processors at Temple in 1965, 66, because I was given one piece of advice by an IBM supervisor that knew my aunt. I actually found out later he was in love with my aunt, but my aunt was married. But anyhow, the point is, on 611 going down from Easton to Philadelphia, where he would go back and forth because I think he was selling IBM computers. One day she says, Billy, they called me Billy, he's here. That's the guy out there. He might know what you can do when you graduate from Temple. I'm halfway through my Temple education, 3 years as an associate degree, become a technician, work in a lab. So I actually work in the lab, working for engineers. But anyhow, he says, one thing he says, like in the movie The Graduate, he goes, get into computers. That's all he said. I go back to my aunt, I go, what's a computer? What's he talking about? I don't know what a computer is. And so then I got into a lot of computers through my chips, my whatever. But that was my one piece of advice: get into computers. And so analog computers is what our neurons are. They're analog processing elements, and we fuel our processor with being able to create a little 70 millivolt or whatever it is differential from the inside of the cell to the outside of the cell, and we regulate that with ion channels. That means that we let a sodium atom or some of these other atomic structures through these ion channels. Well, that has to be really sophisticated intelligence to say, we need another one. We need another ion. Okay, I got it. Just imagine, use your imagination. That takes a lot. That takes a lot for one cell. I mean, now you're saying we're going to build this. We're going to start with transistors. We're going to build them smaller and faster, and look at the NVIDIA. If you said, if we could encapsulate these NVIDIA processors that run off of 70 millivolts, and then how do we feed it? How do we feed it? We're going to eat a burger and we're going to feed an NVIDIA CPU? Come on, give me a break. There's some things here that the physics doesn't work very well. And then I go back to, dude, just live every moment at the max, man. Have a conversation with Bernardo and Hans. Enjoy the hour.
I'm definitely doing that.
I'm saying, you're going to build a machine to enjoy this? That consciousness, now you go to the subjective consciousness, we all brought a number of years. I brought 79 years to the party today. And those are a lot of different experiences that you guys had. But that's where diversity comes in. That's where saying, let's get in a conversation and see where that takes us. And that's our imagination. That's outside of sense SPCA. Our imagination is taking what we did sense, what we did process, and we stored it away in a few microtubules. If I go down the rabbit hole with Stuart, and you go, well, that's my analog functions that I think I need another drink of coffee. I need to fuel my.
There's so much. Yeah, of course, Bernardo.
Can I make a quick comment?
Yeah.
I'm thinking of the viewer who hasn't seen Bill before. At this point, it's crucial to remember something else Bill said, which is we are part of nature. We are animals. We are not different from the rest of nature, because otherwise you may think that he's suggesting some form of dualism, because we were created by the free intelligence of nature, but the NVIDIA chip is created by humans, so it's different, right? No, the same organizing principle that built us builds the NVIDIA chip through us, because
Yeah.
we too are part of
Yeah.
nature.
Yeah.
We're not disconnected. So
I'm starting
just
to
one,
get that.
I'm
Yeah.
thinking about how people can
Yeah.
misunderstand Bill, and I'm trying to preempt that.
Yeah.
Well,
And
we
also
make
very interesting to just, because also I think a lot of people, we're in the age of digital computers and not analog computers, but analog computing is a different paradigm, right? Because in analog computer, the signal can be in the noise, so to speak. When I was reflecting on this with Michael Levin, because what he is doing in biology, we bring our sort of digital computing paradigm vision to sort of our to cells, right? We see the DNA as some proteins are a part of the software, it's the code, and then we have the machinery. The ATP synthesis we see sort of as the hardware doing that shit, and we are sort of have this focus on cellular biology. And then comes Michael Levin, who says that distinction blurs totally. It's an analog system, and I have bioelectric fields that I can influence from the outside that will make that what you thought is the software hardware distinction totally blur and make that cell do something completely different. And this is done in a petri dish. He's doing that, right? So and those fields Levin is talking about, sort of, is that, I'm thinking out loud here, Bernardo, is that sort of nature's free intelligence that somehow then embeds itself in the cells we see doing their things? What are the thoughts of both of
I
you
think
here?
Bill can answer this best.
Okay, so you're bringing up an interesting thing. Mike Levin, I haven't watched everything he's published. I haven't read anything he's written even. So I'm coming from outside of his domain, outside of his science, but I claim he has yet to get that aha moment. The aha moment is not the electric fields. The aha moment is the intelligent field. But I don't, I haven't, all I can do is use words coming from what my background is. So what I'm saying is there, there is an intelligence model of a general human, a general ant, a general bumblebee. And when he shows that the intelligence of a caterpillar needs to morph into a flying thing. I I just watched that. It's a 56-minute, I think, video. I'm like, oh my gosh, awesome. But what I'm getting at is there's an intelligence that basically encapsulates that. And he hasn't, that's the aha moment that he may have. And I can't wait to hear it. I can't wait to see it. I can't wait to see him get his postdocs and his researchers at Tufts and go, hey, dude, how can we figure out where's that shape coming from? See, he's saying that the shape, it's like when he does the tadpole to the frog, then he's saying that's got to morph into a different structure. And it's using the same basic engine, the basic intelligence to make that change. And I'm saying, yeah. So there's an intelligence that's behind the caterpillar that wants to be a butterfly. and then they know how to fly from Canada to Mexico or something like that. And how do they do that? You go, this is so fascinating. This is so awesome. I don't know the answers to these things, but I do know from this model that they're connected. They're connected, but I don't know how. And that's where I'm saying Mike Levin's on this path. He's on this path. I don't need to contaminate his way of looking or thinking. I don't need to contaminate Federico's way of thinking or yours. But you're wandering into my world when we have this conversation. And so there you go. I'm saying you figured it out.
Thanks. Just one super small question, and then back to you, Bernardo, how you reflect on this also with Michael Levin's work, because some viewers might also think we've talked about intelligence, and now we have sort of you coming up with almost platonic forms out there and stuff like that. I mean, is it God to you, Bill? Would you apply the God? Would you use that word to nature's free intelligence? What are your thoughts?
No. As soon as you use God, you go down a rabbit hole of mythology.
Check.
I want to stay out of the rabbit hole called mythology. Now, if you just look at the numbers, there's, of the 8 billion people, I don't know that all 8 billion of them haven't been contaminated with mythology. But mythology is about when we didn't know what we discussed today, we go down the mythology rabbit hole, and then we fight about it. Then we have big wars, and we kill off millions of people in Europe during World War II because they had a different view of their world. And you go, why would you do that? That's insanity. That's the height of insanity. And now you're bringing all this new tools to kill people. Look at what's going on right now in Ukraine, Russia. They're both Russians killing each other. And so if you look at it, it's a civil war like what we had in America. And you go, well, why were we having a problem with a different color skin? Well, how is that possible? How is it possible that your belief causes me to want to kill you? That doesn't work. And that's what I'm saying. I wouldn't use the word God unless you want to talk about it as mythology. And I have a slide on that. We didn't go through that
exactly.
slide.
I slide 10 where you say yeah.
But if we don't know what's going on, philosophers used to be killed by the theology or the God seekers. And so then philosophers come up with, let's get a good question going and let's talk about it. You guys love talking about things. I love it. I love watching it. I enjoy it immensely. And so that's why I watch you guys talk about Roger and Federico and and Michael and whoever you want to talk to. I just think it's wonderful because it resonates with something you want to know. You want to hear it. You want to know it. And you want all these opinions. You don't want to shut down any opinion. If I ever think that your philosophy or opinion or your theology or your mythology or anything like that, I'll always come back to the fact that what Joseph Campbell wrote about and the power of myth, just read that. And you'll go, oh, those myths are really powerful. Yeah. And that's, if you look at it, if my myth and your myth conflict, I don't know how that's possible. For me, I don't see it possible because I know when you talk about God, then we're down in that rabbit hole. And I'm going, you want to go into that rabbit hole? I'm fine, but but I don't think we're going to make any progress. And that's what Ted Humphrey, 3 paragraphs Ted Humphrey wrote. I now have it reflections. If you look on my website, there are reflections. I used to have it as part of the theory, but then I thought, no. He's talking about the isms. He's saying the isms. What basically he's saying is that if you want to know what's going on, you can't go down the isms. You have to go to the SPCA, and then he has period. And this is just in this last month, he and I talked about this, and he says, Bill, you don't know what that last paragraph means. I go, I thought I did. What you're telling me is you don't think I know what that paragraph means. He says, no, I don't think you do. I go, okay, I memorized it. If you want to know what's going on and how it does so, one sentence, find the SPCA, one sentence, period, one sentence. 3 sentences, last paragraph. Look at his reflections. And I said, okay, so you don't think I know what that says? Why do you think that? He says, because when I say that, I'm really saying you can never know intelligence. You can only know the results of it, SPCA, period. Oh. However, then I come back with, oh, I thought you knew intelligence from looking inside of yourself, your self-consciousness, your self-awareness. How did you become you? That's how you can find intelligence, is you're built on it. You are. You came from there. And if you're trying to figure out how to get every one of your cells to move so you take the next step, you're going to overwhelm your mental, cognitive abilities because you want to have your body just train your body to swim faster, like the Olympics, and whatever you're going to work on your mental your mental abilities to teach your cells through repetitive things and go faster and what eat good, get all this. But at the end of the day, you don't want to know what every one of your cells is doing in their ion channels.
Yeah.
If you think if you're going to go down to that level, then
Mm.
I'm saying, well, how about this? Just enjoy the screen with Hans and
Yeah, yeah.
Bernardo.
It's one
Just
wonderful game of exclusion. What it does, so to speak, it excludes everything to the level of me thinking this collective is what is everything there is sitting here with you guys. Where of course we know it is this what Levin is showing us. Collective intelligence started with two cells in the belly of
yeah,
my mother, and it
yeah,
all started. Yes.
yeah.
Um,
But she
I,
didn't build you, you built you.
yeah, that's also nice.
The mythological character did not build
Yeah,
you.
yeah. And we are living in interesting times because you also have slides on how technology of embedded intelligence, so computers we're building, AIs we're building, are can sort of give us feedback or help us sort of mimic something within ourselves. So if you just said sort of you think we're far off from, or you don't see sort of you just don't see that avenue as something fruitful to try and build something that has the feelings we do. Just enjoy us sitting here already. I mean, that's. But what I'm
That
getting
was a
to,
slide that we didn't, that was a comment.
yeah,
Do you know what a feeling is? This is something we haven't talked about. Why did I write this? Really? I wrote it because humanity has been going down the mythological belief rabbit hole to the point where they can't climb back out. They can't climb back out. Their whole world, the songs, the stories, the wars, and the other things. There's so much invested into mythology that how do you back out of that rabbit hole? Well, I found a way of backing out of it.
mm.
But that
And
doesn't mean
Bill,
I have
when
a
you say that rabbit hole of mythology, would you restrict it to sort of then what people commonly understand, like world religions, or would you also say there's mythology going on within science, for instance, that we also
oh
need to
yeah,
sort of get
yeah.
out?
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. What's his name? Tom Nesbitt wrote the Megatrends book back in the early 80s, I think. And his daughter, I met her daughter, his daughter, she lives here in Durango area, I think. She was living in Telluride. But Nana Nesbitt is his daughter. And they wrote a book, High Tech, High Touch. That's an interesting book to read. But they're claiming that the dogma associated with mythology and the dogma associated with technology or sciences, they're both destructive or limiting. So when you call it the Big Bang and then you try to prove the Big Bang, okay, you can get funded, you can get money because people want to know more about what happened with the Big Bang. And I'm saying, I'm not a Big Bang fan, but I don't need to be a Big Bang fan. So I'm not going to lose any friends if I don't believe in the Big Bang. But that's another belief system. And so when you look at dark matter, I was asked to be participant in dark matter, and dark energy and all this other stuff. And you go, well, I'm not in that. I'll join you, but I'm not one of those. I'm not one of those guys. If you call it dark matter, that means that it doesn't emit photons. Okay. And then when Einstein was trying to figure out what was going on, and during a eclipse, he decided that he could see the galaxies. He thought they were stars, I think, but the galaxies on the other side of our sun, which you can't see because the sun is in the way. But when the eclipse happens, you actually can see them because they go around, they curve. So then he said the curvature of space-time. I'm going, okay, all right, he could go with that. Then he put a fudge factor in some of his equations, some of the math, and I'm going, wait a second. What that tells me is that the electromagnetic form called a photon actually has a quanta gravitational wave also. now we're just starting to get people talk about quantum waves and whatever. And I'm saying that has to be the case because that mass of gravitational energy is sucking the photons, and that's why it curves. It's because of the gravitational. Now you could say, well, it could be the magnetic also, right? Well, yeah, it could be. But why don't we go with the idea that your quantum, depending on your mass, if you just explode it right now, how big of a hole would you make? That's a good question. All of your atomic structure just becomes quantum again. But you go, that would be a painful experience, probably. Well, maybe not, because it'd happen really quickly. And so then I wouldn't really have pain. But coming back to this, you're sitting on a chair, probably. I am, and I'm staying here. So that means that all of me has some gravitational quantum. That's all. Just look inside of yourself. How did you stay on the chair while we were talking? Okay, you're electromagnetic. Okay, all right. But what about gravity? And so this is what I'm saying. I'm looking at it from a different viewpoint.
Yeah.
And that may be conflicting with everybody that watches these things. But I'm saying, hey, I don't have an axe to grind with you guys. I love you guys. I have an energy of attraction. I enjoy the fact that you're curious about my way of looking at the world. I'm just Bill, and you're just you. And I love the fact that you're you, and I love the fact that we got on this conversation today. So
Bill,
let's do this
so
again.
much,
Let's do it again.
Yeah,
Maybe
thank you so much.
take a couple of slides.
Yeah,
We can spend an
yeah.
hour on each slide.
Yeah.
Or I'd like to know more about your world too. I'm going to prevent myself from getting contaminated, but I'm happy.
We want to draw everything out of you that we can before you take that step into the land
contamination
of contamination.
happens. There's no vaccine. There's no vaccine against it. But Bill, thank you so much for sharing your presentation. Also for the fact that it's still, as you told me in a previous conversation, work in progress, that you're very much open to suggestion of other people. So we're sharing the whole presentation in full in the link below. And in the comment section, people can just add all their questions, and which might lead to a follow-up conversation with you. And thank you so much for now. I really enjoyed it. Also, Bernardo, thanks for clarifying things. Thanks also for asking explicitly about things you disagree with. I really enjoy that as well. Because we want to be a platform that also...
Disagreements are good. The magic of conflict is about we both grow, or we have the opportunity to both grow from that experience. Your view is different than my view. Great. What can I learn from you? What can my intelligence learn from your intelligence? That's collective intelligence. That's what Mike Levin talks about.
Thank you very much.
Have a good day, and we'll talk again.
Bill. Thank you, Bill.
Bye. All right. Bye.